The study of nature is the study of relationships, for everything in nature is dependent upon and related to everything else in nature. To study nature, we must divide it into little worlds in which just a few of its relationships can be studied at a time. Now, let's explore just one of the many worlds of nature. Although interesting things are likely to be found at the marsh in all seasons, spring and summer are certainly the seasons in which to most fully appreciate the relationships that exist here. For at this time, the insects are all active. The plant life is lush. The reptiles and amphibians are out of hibernation. The migratory birds have all returned, and most birds and animals are with young. Here we readily see nature's most basic relationship, that of living things to water. The marsh provides a constant source of water, in and around which the most important parts of the food chain can flourish. Plants need water in order to survive, and here can be found such a profusion of plant life as to keep the professional botanist or the amateur wildflower enthusiast busy for as long as he wishes. Plants are basic to the food and shelter relationships in the marsh. There are a number of birds and animals that depend directly on plants as a source of food. The robin eats many types of berries, as does the catbird. In these situations, the plant provides the birds with food, while the birds provide the plants with a means of scattering their undigested seeds. The common mallard eats a great many aquatic plants, but can often be seen on the land eating seeds and acorns. But birds are not the only citizens of the marsh who rely on plants for food. The cottontail depends entirely on plant life for his survival, eating leaves, stems, and even blossoms. And the muskrat, who spends most of his time in, under, or near the water, makes the roots and stems of water plants a major part of his diet. He also uses the stems of reeds and cattails to build his little island hut. And, of course, many animals and birds depend on plants for their shelters and nests. Not only are most nests built in or amongst plants for protection, but the nests themselves are most often constructed of plant materials. Plants also provide food and shelter for insects, the most lovely of which are the butterflies, which inhabit the marsh in seemingly endless variety. These are helpful insects, for in their constant search for nectar, they help pollinate the flowers so that seed formation and therefore more plants are assured. Another helpful insect, always common to watery places, is the dragonfly, itself no stranger to beautiful color combinations. Dragonflies are among the greatest eaters of mosquitoes and other harmful insects in the marsh. And as we explore the other eaters of insects, we will begin to understand the real complexities of the interrelationships in the food chain. flies and little water bugs like these are the primary food of most of the fish and frogs of the marsh, which are in turn themselves the primary foods of many of the other birds and animals here. Snakes of many different species inhabit the marsh and prey mainly on these three most important links in the chain: insects, fish, and frogs. Many marsh birds share the same diet. Most impressive of these is the great blue heron. He is an expert fisherman and frog hunter, as well as being an eater of insects, crayfish, and even mice. The much smaller green heron is less varied in his diet, which consists almost entirely of fish and crayfish. And the yellowlegs, one of the many smaller wading birds to be found in the marsh, eats insects as well as fish. One of the best fish catchers is not a wading bird. The kingfisher catches his dinner while flying above the surface of the water. Preferring fish, he will, however, catch occasional frogs and insects. The red-winged blackbird, to some, perhaps the very symbol of the marsh, and a more obvious harbinger of spring than the traditional robin. Until this point, the food chain has been progressing simply and logically, with plants being eaten by insects, which are eaten by frogs, and fish, which are eaten by birds. The redwing, however, provides a good example of how the food chain often doubles back on itself, illustrating just how complex and intertwined these relationships are. The redwing eats insects and seeds, but in building its nest in the plants above the water, the young, especially in their first attempts at flight, sometimes fall into the water where they're eaten by the larger fish and frogs. This is also true of baby ducks, who swim long before they can fly, and are therefore exposed to a great many dangers from which they cannot quickly escape. Large bass find the smaller ducklings an easy meal, and the larger bullfrogs, nearly invisible in the weeds, will strike at almost anything they can fit in their mouths, as long as it moves. Frogs, in fact, are especially interesting animals to watch. They are extremely important because of their pivotal role in the food chain. They're abundant. They don't move around too much, and they always eat above water. Look for them along the water's edge. Patience in this pursuit can be very rewarding. Turtles also are abundant. Most common are the painted turtles, often seen sunning themselves on logs and rocks. Their diet is fairly varied, though limited to things found in the water: aquatic plants and insects, worms, and small fish. The smallest of turtles also fall prey to frogs. No one in the marsh, however, has nearly so varied a diet as the adaptable raccoon. Although not usually active during the day, he can sometimes be seen at the water's edge looking for fish, frogs, crayfish, or snails. But he also eats seeds and berries, insects, snakes, eggs, mice, and birds when he can catch them. In fact, there is hardly anything a raccoon won't eat, as long as it won't eat him. The food relationships in an area such as the marsh are in a complicated and delicate balance. Removal of any one species from the area would cause a serious upset. Removal of a food source would, of course, cause the predators to move away in search of food elsewhere. And removal of a predator species would cause its natural prey to outgrow its own food supply. This food chain relationship in the marsh is only one kind of relationship in only one small world of nature. There is much more yet to explore and learn in this and other worlds of the many worlds of nature.